Yeah. Okay, can I test check, please, to make sure that people online can hear? Bit of feedback then. If anybody could respond to that online. Yes, Peter Clay. Thank you very much, Peter. Right. Okay, we will proceed. All you've missed online is the usual housekeeping introductions. So agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Jamie, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. We have received apologies from Councillor Power, for whom Councillor Woods is substituting, and apologies from Councillor Cravis, for whom Councillor Stanton is substituting. That's the apologies. And we've also received apologies from Mickey Green as lead officer. Chair, he's unable to attend.
Thank you very much. I'd like to move on to minutes from the previous meeting, please. Sorry, what was that? Oh, declaration of interest. Yes. Oh, I beg your pardon. Okay, sorry, mine are the wrong way around. Declaration of interest.
Adam Boyden.
Hang on, right? We've skipped. Have I got any apologies, please?
Adam Boyden.
Thank you very much. And declarations of interest, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Chair of the Rivers Authority, so when we get to that item, I think I ought to, declare an interest and not act as a member of the committee for that item, but obviously contribute in response to any questions.
I think we have the right to ask you questions if we wish. Harry Monk.
Thank you. I also sit on the Somerset Rivers Authority.
Okay, you can stay in the room. Sometimes you have to go out. Minutes of the minutes of from the previous meeting, please. I'll bring in Andy Kendall. Andy. Andy Kendall, you've got your hand up. I'm wondering if you're declaring an interest.
Sorry, I was just saying I can hear you online. I'll take it down. I thought I took it down. Sorry.
Okay. Minutes from the previous meeting, Councillor Henry Hobhouse. Henry, could you go online?
At the previous meeting, we had our second unanimous vote to hold a separate meeting of this scrutiny committee to look at the data and why the levels were being polluted. That meeting has not yet been called. I understood that scrutiny was for backbench members to call the policy to account and for the backbench members to be in control of what the scrutiny committee was actually doing. For the third occasion, I am going to ask for a vote on whether we hold a water scrutiny committee meeting separate to any other agenda item. I'm looking for a seconder, and I would be prepared to allow this to happen in 2 months' time, but it needs to be properly organised, Mr. Chairman.
Can I just interject at that point and say, as far as I'm aware, I was told I was not here at the last meeting. I was told that this vote had taken place, and until this morning, I was not aware that there was any intention not to have a meeting. And I have had discussions, and the intention was that we would call this meeting in February, subject to getting the right people around the table. Other discussions have taken place in which I think we can actually hold a constructive meeting with useful proposals, perhaps to put at the end of it. So I'm a bit mystified as to why this issue has suddenly come up this morning. Is there anybody that can enlighten me on this? Yes.
Thanks, Chair. I think that there was discussion during one of the scrutiny meetings about the scrutiny agenda and how full it was, and there was a question about whether a meeting about water needed to be an extra meeting or one on the schedule going ahead, and I think that might be kind of where some of the issues have come up, but being solutions focused, it looks like it's, I don't know if it is on the schedule yet or if it would be an extra meeting, and maybe that will depend on what might come through to this committee that is kind of unexpected, which is entirely possible. So I think it's just about kind of managing the workload issue, but it sounds as though everyone's keen for it to happen, and there is an intention that it would do so.
Yes. All right, Henry.
Much as I love the portfolio holder, this was voted on in November. We are now halfway through January. We still haven't got a date. This is exactly what happened in June on the original vote. It was then never scheduled till October. It was then turned private so that none of the information was in the public domain. And we need to have a date now, and I need to have a third vote. I'm proposing it. I have a seconder in Steve.
I'm happy to take the proposal and say, but I'd like a brief discussion on it first to get views. Dave Mansell, please.
Thank you. We did vote for a meeting, and it was clear we did all request one. My understanding, unless I've forgotten incorrectly, but my recollection is that it was for an additional meeting to be held, and I hope that's how it can be conducted, and would be pleased to see it occurring.
Thank you, Dave. Yes, my understanding was it was an additional meeting and it was a one-item agenda. And I think we've discussed this a lot. I think we need to have some sort of meeting which is fairly conclusive and actually gets the matter sorted rather than it dragging on for a long time. I don't think that serves anybody's purpose. I'm very happy with that. And I've got a seconder. Steve, right, Councillor Ashton seconded. Obviously, this is subject to us being able to get the right people around the table. And I should reiterate, it won't be the same people as before. I want to take a proposal from Councillor Hobhouse in writing as to the kind of people, the people that he wishes to bring. And I want to put that to others so that we have a balanced view, but it will be with a view to taking this debate forward, not simply an information session, which is what we essentially had in October. So it will be a different meeting. There's no point in repeating the meeting we had before. This will be a more, I hope, a constructive way forward. And with that in view, we have to ensure that the officers can help us to get the right people around the table at the right time. And we should aim, I believe, for next month. And if that is impossible, if all the people come, then as soon as possible after that. So on those grounds, I accept that. Thank you very much for that proposal. I have a seconder in Steve Ashton. Can I take a vote on that, please, for those in favour? Right, thank you very much. That's carried. Moving on. I'm going back to the minutes. Dave, would you come in on is this on the minutes? Yep, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, a couple of bits which I don't think are quite captured as they should be. So item 39 on the action tracker last time, the point on the climate development plan, which was something we had put a recommendation forward to the exec for. I think what this doesn't capture is that it has been debated by the exec and a view taken. And that was what I was trying to say last time, that the committee was not being told that the exec have considered our recommendation and taken a view and taken a decision. And I was keen that what the exec had decided came back, so we knew what the outcome of our recommendation was. And I'm sorry, I think we're still slightly missing it. So for this one, for the minutes, I think it's enough to just add that our recommendation on that point has been debated, and I hope we can add to our action tracker what the outcome is. So I will come to that, if I may, when we look at the action tracker. And just secondly, small point, but nevertheless important and in some ways relevant to what Henry's just raised too. Right at the very end, it says the committee noted the forward plan. I think part of what we've been saying is and possibly there's different terminology and difference between what county officers were used to and what district people are used to. But it says noted the forward plan. I don't think this committee as yet has had what I regard as a forward plan or work programme, whatever we're calling it. And I believe we've raised it right from the very first meeting. Corporate and Resources have one, Community Scrutiny have one, but this Scrutiny Committee, for some reason, has not had a forward plan, work programme, whatever we're going to call it. It is actually on this agenda. We were told we're going to get one, but I still don't think we have, or again, I'm not seeing it. And so the request is that we have one, and that point was made last time. So I think that's the point that should be noted in the minutes, that the committee is requesting that we have a forward plan. And perhaps the important part of it, and why it connects to Henry, is because it's the opportunity for the members to request what they wish the committee to cover. And at the moment, we're just being fed things from officers, and that's fine. Officers have got important things to feed to us, but we're not being allowed to say what we wish to cover. And that is not my understanding of how scrutiny should work. And I think the way to address it is through having a proper forward plan or work programme.
Thank you, Dave. I would agree with that. I think it was actually brought up at full council as well.
Well, it was, because the annual report of our committee said we had one, so it needed to be corrected because we didn't.
I think on the would you like to respond to that, Jamie?
I'd probably, it is the next item really, which is forward work programme. So if Councillor Mansell's okay, I'll just hold off replying to those points and. Sorry, that's fine.
We can, but it's just that the minutes are wrong. In the minute, we didn't just note the forward plan, we requested to have a forward plan.
Okay, all right. No, that is fair. That's fair comment, Councillor Mansell. I'm happy to get the minutes reflected to amend that. I do respond to your point about the paper in front of us for item 4 not now reflecting a forward plan for the committee. I'm not sure what you would be expecting a forward plan for the committee to look like that isn't covered in item 5. Sorry. Item 5 on the report that comes up, pages 2 and 3 and 4.
Chair, the work programme was published as a supplement to the agenda. And members would have had a notification on that. It's published on the website.
Sorry. Yes, do come in and respond to that.
Okay.
But do put your mic on.
Okay. I will, when we can share that item on screen now, but published as part of the papers on the website, and I appreciate what you're saying, published as part of the papers on the website is a forward plan for this committee. I think it's fairly detailed. I think it sets out fairly clearly what the committee are going to want to, or the suggestions from officers as to what the committee would like to look at. Obviously, there is scope within that for the committee to suggest other items to add to the forward plan, which is why we've published the executive forward plan as well as part of the committee papers for the committee to consider any items that they feel we are missing. So, Steph, are you able to share as we're already talking about it? Thank you.
Thank you for that.
So I really no wish to be a nuisance, but can it be included in the papers that we are sent out, please? And most of us, I think, look at mod.gov. That's where we expect our papers to be. And I haven't got it in my mod.gov, without doubt.
Yes, Councillor Woods.
Yeah, I'm not normally a member of this committee, but it looks to me this isn't a forward plan that's shown on the agenda. It's what you've done or not done. It's a backward plan. Is that normal? It's not normal. I've been on other scrutinies and it's not.
Sorry, sorry, Councillor Woods. Item 5 is setting out items the committee will consider in March 24, April 24, May 24, June 24. So that they are forward looking. The outcome tracker that was published as part of the paper is the committee's monitoring effectively of what it has considered and actions following on from that, be it formal recommendations or task and finish groups or work that the committee needs to receive updates from officers. So there's the forward looking bit, which is the forward plan, which Steph is hopefully going to share in a second. Councillor Rigby would like to come in as well. And then there's the outcome tracker, which is monitoring the work the committee has already done.
Thank you, Rosemary. I completely take that point. Councillor Rigby wishes to speak. But he's struggling with his microphone.
Oh, you are alive now. Sorry.
Mike Rigby.
Plenty. Let's try that. I just wanted to say that when I looked at the agenda for this meeting, clearly the forward plan is not part of the agenda as we've heard. It is a supplementary, but if you click the link, you get this lovely blank screen. So none of us can see the forward plan, just to be clear. Councillor Wilkins has just had a look at trying to find it from another angle and he gets the same outcome. So none of us can see it.
Yeah, thank you. That has been the case. I was wondering if that had been rectified in the last day, but it hasn't. So it would help. I think it's as much about communicating the forward plan and the ideas as it is and presenting them as it is about having one. I'm pretty sure there's lots of ideas out there that are coming through this committee and elsewhere for what we should be doing going forward. I think that we've discussed that sufficiently now. Any other points on the previous minutes?
Sorry, Chair. What I will say is obviously, I appreciate there's been publication issues with regarding the forward plan. What I can say is we do now have what I would consider a proper first draft of a forward plan for this committee. Between Steph and I, we will circulate it to the committee today following this discussion so that you can see it clearly and have easy access to it. Obviously, if councillors have any views from either subjects that we discussed today or from considering the exec forward plan for items that they would like to add to it, then we are happy to add those to the forward plan. And obviously this is the version that we will keep updated as we go on, and it will be published in advance with the papers for all future committee meetings. But I hopefully, Councillor Mansell, when you see it properly, it will tick that box for you. And I absolutely agree that we need it. And it was a gap on this committee compared to other committees.
Thank you. Still on any other items regarding the previous meeting in the minutes?
Could I propose that we actually sign them and move on?
Coincidentally, I was thinking the same thing. Yes, please. Okay, now we've got public question time. Is Councillor Nick Hall here? Yes, he's there. That's John Hall. John Hall. Nick Hall, yes. Sorry. Yes. Sorry, it's right on here. Thank you. Thank you, Nick. We met earlier. Do please take a seat.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So good morning, Chair. Good morning, councillors. My name is Nick Hall. I'm a Pilton Parish Councillor. Today I'm speaking in a personal capacity about Glastonbury Festival traffic management. Firstly, thank you for providing a response to my original statement and questions. So these points build on that. You have confirmed that the highways and traffic issues related to Glastonbury Festival are under your committee's remit. And now I assume that there will be coordination with the Scrutiny Committee for Communities, whose remit covers the licensing and planning of Glastonbury Festival. You have stated that there is no publicly available debrief report on Glastonbury Festival highways and traffic issues. And I'd like to just ask the question, is there an intention to create such a report? It is still unclear if Somerset Council's traffic management team have been made aware of the issues that some in our community have raised. However, you have now provided a contact email address for that team. So now if members of our community feel that the event operator, Glastonbury Festival Events Limited, is not taking their their concerns seriously, then they can now contact the council directly, which is helpful. Thank you. Also, thank you for the update on the strategic traffic management plan associated with the festival, which is a condition of the recent planning approval. I'd like to ask, so given the applicant has not yet submitted this plan, am I right in assuming that the festival must continue to operate under the old planning approval? You have also confirmed that there are no Somerset Council costs associated with the traffic management and highways for the main Glastonbury Festival event, i.e. the costs of managing the traffic at the festival are cost neutral for Somerset Council. There are some outstanding issues which I raised, and I look forward to hearing back from the traffic management events team on those issues. I will just note them here. They are the temporary traffic restriction orders, and my point is there's insufficient consultation about closure of public roads and footpaths. Second point is we have potholes and large-scale road degradation around the festival site, and that's to be addressed. We have the impact of external or off-site campsites, which in fact are large-scale events in their own right. And we have a very thorny issue of reducing the traffic through the Pilton Village. It is particularly concerning that the head of service, Bev Norman, on the 13th of December, in the 13th of December Scrutiny Board minutes, made some statements about the purpose of the village car park, which are slightly incorrect. This village car park holds 1,800 cars and drags vehicles through the centre of our village, and something needs to be done about it. So just finally, one further observation about the separation of powers. In my opinion, there needs to be a clearer distinction between Somerset Council's role as service provider and regulator, particularly in the area of traffic management. So finally, thank you for taking the time to listen to my points, and it is encouraging to see some dialogue on these festival issues starting. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Nick. Could you put the mic up? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I'm looking for a response. Mike O'Dowd, is it? Are you?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mike O'Dowd-Jones, the Service Director for Infrastructure and Transport. So obviously, thank you for the question, and we have published the initial response to the question, and it's thank you for highlighting those additional points and going, into some of the further nuances of the issues. I think it's fair to say that we're very happy and open to have conversations with the local community about these issues in the run up to the event. So there's absolutely no barrier to our traffic management team coming and having a conversation about these things. I think that's probably the best way forward to go into some detail on the matters. In terms of the planning related point about how the festival operates prior to the strategic traffic management plan being approved, I think I'll take that one away and get a formal response on the matter, as it would be a detailed planning matter that I wouldn't want to just so we'll come back on that one. The other points are absolutely noted, and I will certainly take those forward in the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Am I right in assuming that some of these responsibilities were district responsibilities prior to this year?
Oh, we've been responsible for the county council previously was responsible for the traffic management arrangements and continues to do so under the new council. Planning matters were obviously considered by the former district council and have now come into the one Somerset Council. So it's kind of a mixture of issues, I think, that have been raised that cut across both the councils, but certainly we can jointly move forward on them.
Thank you. Great. Right. Thank you very much. Moving on, agenda item 5 is the work programme and yes, Henry.
Sorry, I'm very bad at the microphone. I have a loud voice. I don't normally need it. Excuse me on that. You have an S19 flood report in the positive. as far as I can see on the issue, for information, you're bringing one flooding report from Chard, and there are a whole lot more outstanding. Could we have updates, please, in that issue, in particular for my issue in my division, which is the May the 9th flooding on the River Cam, and all the other S19 reports, which are now due to what's happened this autumn. Because I do find it slightly wrong that we are now in 24 and we are considering an S19 report for Chard, which happened in October 21.
Thank you. Jamie, have you got any response to that? Or do we? Okay, sorry.
I think we're probably wise to take that away and make sure that we give the committee an update on the kind of programme, take Councillor Hobhouse's point around timescales, and if we can give visibility and clarity, that will help, I hope.
Thank you. Just as I was interrupting, work programme and action tracker is what we're on.
Sorry, Councillor Mansell, did you want to come in before?
So as I indicated earlier, so September, we had an item on the local plan, and it was there last time. And last time the report back to us was just completed. It didn't actually give any detail to us. And I did raise this last time. But so as I said earlier, it has been reported to executive. Executive have responded. I think that response needs to come back to this committee. We need to know what happened. I do know, I was there, but I think that the important principle is it's reported back to the committee. So the committee is informed of the outcome of our recommendation, and we may then consider how we wish to take it, whether we wish to take it forward. And it's now dropped off the action tracker. I don't really feel we've concluded that one in my view.
Right, yeah, thank you for that point. It's noted, but I don't think we've really asked Jamie to present this item yet. We're jumping in with items I think would be mentioned later on. So if we can just wait for Jamie to say what he has to.
To be honest, Chair, I sort of feel like I've covered this item a bit ad nauseum already. A fair point, Councillor Mansell. I will ensure that that response is probably circulated to the committee as part of that. But I absolutely accept your point that it should still be reflected on there because in theory the committee has completed it. As the committee will see, there are a number of items amber on the work programme at the moment, so they will be appearing on the next meeting as well. Only the green item will, in theory, drop off for the next meeting, but we will ensure that that update is given to the committee, Councillor Mansell. The only bit I wanted to raise is members will see under the 19th of July, there was an action saying members received a report setting out the next steps of the council's strategic approach to climate, environment and sustainability to ensure that the council was committed to reducing carbon emissions, achieving net zero and supporting nature's recovery. Members resolved that a climate strategy refresh task and finish group be set up. Officers are now in a position to be able to support that. So this is a request for volunteers to join that task and finish group. I haven't spoken to the relevant officers beyond an initial discussion, so I'm not sure the what's the word, the time commitment required from officers, but I would imagine it would be the usual task and finish group type work, so probably somewhere between 4 and 6 meetings over the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks. If anyone wishes to volunteer now, then I'm happy to take your names. If you want to go away and think about it and then let me or Steph know subsequently, then please do so, but we'll be looking to set that up ASAP. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, please do speak to Steph if you want to be on that task and finish group, or I think perhaps in follow-up would be if we don't get, for the people that aren't here, perhaps an email to the committee to ask for other volunteers going forward. Thank you. Anything else on this item? We've discussed some of it earlier effectively. I think we're okay to move on. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 6, economy, employment and planning, level 2 devolution deal position statement. Paul Hickson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a little bit about, excuse me, recovering from a cold, so there may be moments.
Just a little bit about the purpose of this item. It's to provide an update about the national devolution agenda and how this might affect Somerset. You have a report with the agenda. I'm not going to append that with a presentation, just talk to the report. It's very much a position statement for the committee, and the recommendation is the report that you note the position here. Just a little bit about the context and the background to the report. With devolution in this report, we're talking about the transfer of powers and functions, funding from national to local government, and the role that government sees for deals between central and local government to achieve this. For clarity, we're not talking about local decisions about devolution of council services to parish, town or city councils, or to indeed other bodies. That's not the kind of subject matter of the report. Just a little bit about the kind of the history of devolution in England over recent years. We've seen the government work with areas in the cities and the kind of metropolitan areas to initiate devolution, and we've seen that as, you know, particularly in places like Birmingham and Manchester, where there are directly elected mayors and combined authorities overseeing that approach. In the southwest, probably the nearest example of that is the west of England, and we've seen less kind of progress nationally in terms of devolution in non-metropolitan areas. That said, the government's Levelling Up White Paper from February 2022 announced changes and kind of developments of its approach to devolution and gave it more structure, I suppose, as well. In that white paper, the government set out a devolution framework, setting out, I suppose, a menu of levels of devolution available to local areas, both in terms of I suppose, the powers and functions that would be at stake, and also the kind of governance arrangements that would be expected to be placed alongside that. So in simple terms, and there's a table in the report, the kind of highest level of devolution, as in those kind of trailblazers in the metropolitan areas, where the highest level of powers are devolved, also come with the expectation that there's a directly elected mayor. In level 2 of devolution compared to that level 3, lesser powers are at stake for transfer, but equally no expectation of the governance changes that a directly elected leader or mayor or a combined committee would involve. The other important part of the white paper was the announcement of county deals, effectively signalling a willingness from government to extend the geography of devolution outside of the kind of major urban areas to kind of I'll call them very generally the shire areas of England as well. And the government announced shortly after the white paper an initial set of 10 county deal areas where it would negotiate with the local authorities in those areas to develop a deal. I have to say that Somerset wasn't one of those 10 areas. Our kind of neighbours in Devon and nearish neighbours in Cornwall were in the southwest. So a little bit of a picture there. West of England as the kind of level 3 established deal area. Devon and Cornwall areas post the white paper where county deal negotiations were set up. Cornwall now has a deal in place, and the Devon authorities, albeit not with Plymouth, are close to the kind of conclusion of a level 2 deal as well. Just a little bit about the current state of play. In the autumn statement, the government announced that it was having kind of moved through those county deals from the post the Levelling Up white paper. It was interested in principle in a further widening of geography of devolution at level 2, but specifically in areas I'm going to use the language from the autumn statement here, single institution area deals, meaning where they could agree a deal with a unitary or county council in two-tier areas with a population above 500,000. That is reflective of the stage of the parliamentary cycle. Government would only have time in the remaining parliamentary period to agree a deal in those areas because governance changes wouldn't be required. Somerset is potentially one of the areas that could negotiate a single institution or area deal. That's the last time I used that phrase. And as a result of that, in December, the leader of council wrote to the government expressing Somerset's interest in being an area where one of those deals could be negotiated. So we've made that kind of expression of interest. And the expectation is that over the coming months, government is looking, we understand, to work on these deals with a set of authorities together and at pace so that they could, where there's an agreement, they can put in place deals with those additional areas. Level 2, for emphasis, is very much an introductory level of devolution. And it's likely that the scope for deal with those authorities that express an interest in this stage is going to be quite limited. So the paper talks a little bit about the areas of possibility there. The adult education budget is an area of potential. Similarly, Homes England land assembly powers, where that's relevant. And finally, I'm not sure this is of interest to Somerset, but bus franchising powers as well are sort of the core elements of what might be available for that limited initial level 2. So just in conclusion, I think a few things to say. Firstly, that's an early stage of a process. Clearly, we've as a council, we've expressed an interest. We're waiting government's formal response, and we'll see how that process progresses. There are limited things at stake, so there's not a big window of opportunity here in the specifics if we are going to progress a deal. I think a phrase that I often use about devolution, it sounds a cliche, but I think it's factual, is that it's a journey. So if you look at those kind of early areas that perhaps 5 and more years ago agreed their initial deals, they've negotiated subsequent deals with government that extend the amount of powers and functions that are or have been devolved to them. So it's potentially a progressive journey. I think the final thing to say is that, as I mentioned, the remainder of the parliamentary cycle, suspect that all parties will be looking at what their devolution offers might be and how that plays into their manifestos. So again, being part of a community of authorities that are areas with devolution deals puts us perhaps in a better place for the longer term post the general election, whatever the kind of state of play is in that respect. So that just wanted to give you the context of where things are in terms of the overall devolution agenda, the specific around the kind of initial level 2 deal opportunity for Somerset, and just reflecting briefly at the end about the kind of longer term as well. Chairman, I hope that's helpful in providing a context to the report.
Thanks very much for that. Do we have any questions? No, sorry, Dave.
Yes, thanks for the report. Sounds very interesting and should be a good thing. And I'm sure it doesn't seem to be too much doubt about that. That it gives more powers. I hope funding potentially as well. So yes, certainly my feeling is to give support for it and hope it can happen. it sounds though there is some consideration over what it might cover, so I will make a couple of comments on that, and looked at the table under 3.7 in that regard. I tend to feel there could be something in bus franchising. I mean, it'd be a big step, and clearly, and I understand, you know, we're going down the enhanced partnership route at the moment. Whether there's a scope to do a bit of both in different areas, I'm not sure, but I think you know, there's a common feeling, one, that, you know, our buses are inadequate in Somerset, and funding is clearly a big issue. I think there's a feeling also, though, that competition is felt to be a big issue as well, in that you know, one of our biggest operators has you know, there's little competition on the routes and the way routes are awarded. Well, they're not awarded at the moment. You know, it's whether an operator you know, takes it up and whether we provide funding for any. So I do tend to think there could be something in bus franchising, because it would introduce an element of competition which is lacking at the current time. I don't think it's possible at the moment, but I believe franchising is still, you know, a developing issue and having more attention paid to it, and it might even enable local authority buses to be provided. I'm not knowledgeable enough to know, but I have a feeling that's not possible at the moment. But I gather it's something talked about. But even if it allows competition and more control and more integration by the council's involvement, so personally, I wouldn't discard bus franchising. I think there could be something to look at there. So that's one. And the other one, amongst the strategic roles it lists, are climate change and delivery of action towards net zero, and adults skills market. I mean, now there's a number of things that could be mentioned on those. I would just mention one, and something that, you know, we're gravely lacking in this country and in this county, and that's retrofit. So there's big job opportunities. This is big economic development opportunity, something that we should be having, and it aligns with our climate objectives. It's a skills shortage as well. We need, you know, more people able to deliver the insulation levels that are needed to the you know, that's needed, and for heat pumps. So you know, this is a big area that's needed big time. So personally, you know, if there's opportunities for us to move that forward, which this might allow, they fit within the headings very well. I hope we would give them some serious look and see whether we can turn this into a big opportunity for Somerset. But yeah, it looks good.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Points? Just one point that I would like clarifying. Am I right in thinking that devolution can be, we could apply for devolution with neighbouring authorities? Is that the intention?
I think come back to my points around the journey that I referred to in the presentation. The specific window of opportunity for Somerset, and I am going to use the phrase again, apologies, is about a single institution deal, because to establish a devolution arrangement over a wider geography needs a combined authority or similar structure. Parliamentary time is needed to give authority to that being established, and also time locally to go through the consultations and the dialogue about the appropriateness and approach. And government's view is that they want to establish additional depth to the geography of devolution in the remaining period of the parliamentary term, and there isn't time for that. So in the specific short term, no, I have to say, but for the longer term, absolutely. And if we look at examples elsewhere in the country, I'm going to use a distant area, the northeast, as an example of this. If you look at the initial deals that have been struck around devolution, they've been on tight urban geographies, but the northeast is moving to a combined authority covering Newcastle City, Northumberland and Durham. So widening the geography and also growing the powers that sit underneath that devolved area as well. So I think it's it's a case of building over time, and that might lead to wider geographical collaborations for us. Certainly there are kind of informal conversations with our neighbours around how we're all approaching this agenda that would enable that type of dialogue to happen.
Right, thank you for that. Yeah, my thoughts being that to our north, we've got two small unitary authorities that wouldn't qualify because they're about 200,000 each. And we share bus services and health services with them. And a combined bid might be a good idea, but I take your point entirely. You start off with Somerset and then maybe expand outwards. So thank you. If there's no more questions on that for Paul, we'll move on to the next point, which is agenda item 7, Somerset Rivers Authority, and it's a draft strategy and flood action plan. And I'm asking Dixie Dart, are you introducing this? Or introducing our speaker?
Not that I know of, Chair. I think it's going to be David Mitchell.
Yeah, David, sorry, I thought you asked me to introduce him earlier on.
It's the plastics, the flexi plastic.
Oh, yeah, sorry,
which
my
is the
fault.
last item on the
My
agenda.
fault, yeah, memory loss.
I am on the SRA board like
Okay.
Harry and Mike, but I think David is best placed to give us the overview. Thank you.
I think what it is, I'm so anxious to jump to the end of the meeting that I called you in early. But sorry about that, David. Thank you very much for coming today, and we'll be interested in your report.
Thank you, Chair. Just firstly, just to check that the Chair is happy with me, my report has two distinct items within it. One is about the executive decision that will be taken on the 6th of March. And the second part of it is talking around the strategy and action plan. So if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll talk about the exec report and then pause to take any questions on that specific recommendation.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you everyone for inviting me along, giving me the opportunity to speak to you. I'm David Mitchell, I'm the Somerset Rivers Authority Manager. And the report I've submitted to you has a couple of recommendations within it, one of which is to take a look at a draft executive report for a decision about being host authority for the Somerset Rivers Authority into next year. And the second part is I've submitted our draft strategy and action plan for you to have a look at and provide feedback and comment on. So firstly, sorry, just moving through my own slides. So on the next slide, if I can just start with the executive decision and run through the purpose of that. Firstly, apologies that within your pack, it's quite dense amount of paperwork that goes along with that executive decision. I just wanted to give the committee as much information as possible. The purpose of that executive decision is really all about giving Somerset Council as host authority reassurance that the SRA is operating in a financially prudent manner and is taking decisions that our host authority and accountable body is fully supportive of and has sight of. So the purpose of the report, what does two main things. It will confirm the confirmation of funds for the Somerset Rivers Authority into next year. The funds are raised through council tax. And it will also confirm that the council will continue to be our host authority and accountable body. I'll talk about that in a little bit more in a second. Important point to raise is that the SRA is funded. We refer to it as a shadow precept, which is not entirely accurate, but it's a way of distinguishing it from the council tax generally. Specific funds were put into the council tax base back in 2016-17 for specific use of funding the Somerset Rivers Authority. That's why we refer to it as a shadow precept. And on that point, those funds, because they were put into the council tax base specifically for that, they do not decrease the funds available for the council for other services. The SRA, when we talk about the Somerset Rivers Authority, I'll come on to this more in a second, but we are a partnership. When we talk about the SRA team, that's myself and 3 other full-time colleagues and 1 part-time colleague. I'm always keen to make it clear that we are about hosting the partnership. We're not a separate entity that has lots of staff out on the ground delivering projects. A final point to make is that what the SRA does with the funding that is raised for us is we then provide grant funding to our partners and others to deliver projects. And the report, the exec report, will cover off details around our memorandum of understanding to make sure that the Somerset Council executive fully understands our governance arrangements and provides them the reassurance the SRA itself follows strict governance and decision-making processes, and also ties in with Somerset Council's own governance processes, so that ultimately the accountable body has sign off on financial decisions and legal matters, etc. So next slide. Just some people are very familiar with the Somerset Rivers Authority, but some may not be. So I'll just give you a very quickly a little bit more of background, which is relevant to the exec decision and also to our strategy and action plan element. So the Somerset Rivers Authority was established after the floods of 13-14. Following those floods, there was a lot of local dissatisfaction about what had happened, a feeling that maybe national priorities didn't work quite as well in Somerset, particularly the funding model. So there was a desire to have an ability to raise some money more locally and base some of our actions, at least, much more specifically on local decision making. And it's very much focused on responding to that 13-14 event, conscious of the kind of amount of economic damage that happened. The flood action plan that's shown on the screen there was drafted during the floods of 13-14, and the Somerset Rivers Authority actually comes out of an action within that plan. The SRA now oversees the delivery of that plan, which is now 10 years old. And on the screen, you can see who the partners are in the Somerset Rivers Authority. That's important to note for many reasons, not least of which is, as I mentioned, the SRA is a partnership. Everything we do is done through our partners. They are the risk management authorities and, other organisations which have all the powers and responsibilities and skills and knowledge to deliver using SRA grant funding. Next slide. So just a little bit more detail on what the Somerset Rivers Authority is. The flood and water sector is quite confusing for many people to get their head around anyway. The SRA is another entity put into that mixture of risk management authorities, drainage boards, all those types of things. So it's important to be clear what we are and what we are not. We are a partnership, an unincorporated association, hence why we need Somerset Council to be our host authority. We have no legal status of our own. I've mentioned about how we are funded through council tax, and the real core purpose of the SRA, it's about extra. We raise extra money, we fund our partners to undertake extra work. Essentially things that would not otherwise happen is what we aim to deliver and support our partners to deliver. Yes, there's lots of kind of grey areas of exactly what is delivered around what extra versus business as usual activities, but we do go through a strict process with our partners to make sure that we really are funding extra. And the final point to emphasise again, the SRA is not a risk management authority, so therefore, for example, when we're talking about organising a scrutiny session on water related matters, it's the Somerset Rivers Authority can be in the room and will help to answer discussions, but the important people in the room absolutely are the risk management authorities, like Somerset Council, Environment Agency. They are the organisations with the powers and responsibilities, and they really are at the core of what the SRA is able to achieve. So just moving on to the next slide. Just very briefly, we've been in existence for 10 years now. The SRA are coming up in 10 years. A lot has been achieved through the money that is raised locally, £26 million raised so far from local residents. So we are very conscious of that direct link between the council taxpayer and what we achieve. 237 projects have been approved so far. Many of those projects have multiple sub-projects that are delivering multiple activities. And that dotty map that you can see on the screen shows all the locations that the SRA has already funded activities across. It's very much came out of 13-14 floods on the levels and moors, but it's very much about working right across the whole county now. Next slide. So just coming back from that background information to the executive decision that will be considered on the 6th of March. Two key things that we want to get across to the executive at that point is that the SRA is being financially prudent with the finances that are provided to us. So we will present them with the SRA's budget for the following year, and to obviously reassure people that we're operating in with a budget that is within our the total amount we have available. And that budget is largely calculated based upon, if you go on to the next slide, what the SRA board does each year is consider a list of proposals that come to us for suggested schemes to tackle obviously the risks and impacts of flooding, and they will aim to, in March, approve a programme of works, and that feeds into the budget that the council ultimately reviews and will sign off on. Unfortunately, when the report pack was published, there was some information wasn't available because the SRA board papers had not been published at that point, but I think subsequently we did circulate some further information to give you more background information on each of those proposals. Just to finish up on this first point about exec decision, the process for the SRA is they will consider their draft 24-25 budget and programme this Friday at their board meeting. Our funding is ultimately confirmed at February budget setting meeting. From that point on, we know what amount of funds we have, and the Somerset Council Executive will be asked to consider the key decision report on the 6th of March. And then on the 8th of March, the SRA board then subsequently approves next year's enhanced programme and budget. And from the 1st of April, we can press on and deliver more projects as I described earlier. I think that's probably all I wanted to say on the exec decision report, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, any questions on that part of the presentation? Okay, Councillor Woods.
Going to the crunch of this matter, the Rivers Authority has always been funded through after the Somerset County Council's budget was agreed. Yes. Therefore, are the authority now, do they actually understand that the 10% they have to include something on the top of it? They're talking about asking for a 10% increase in the precept. Now, where does this stand with it? Because this is on top of that. And do the government and this authority understand that? And have I got it wrong?
It's a good question. Hopefully somebody can answer it. Are you?
Yeah, so on the specifics of that, as I touched on, in 2016-17 financial year, government undertook a alternative notional amount procedure, which put extra funding into Somerset County Councils, well, all the councils actually, district and county, it put extra money into their base, which established a certain amount of money for the Somerset Rivers Authority. Each subsequent year, which was 1.25% of that year's council tax. So each subsequent year, the councils have allocated that same amount to the Somerset Rivers Authority. So that's around about £3 million now. So what happens is that continues within the council tax base. There's the change, how much the councils raise their council tax by has no impact on how much the SRA receives. The SRA has not increased the amount it has asked for since inception. So it's a long-winded way of saying it has no impact on the council's budget, if that's what's worrying you, Councillor Woods. It's quite a convoluted.
So are you saying that if this authority choose to have a precept that's 10% instead of 5%, which is what we used to, that doesn't impact on this?
It doesn't impact on it because the extra funding was established in 16-17, it essentially sits in the council tax base already. And then the SRA does not ask for any more at the minute than what was asked for back in 16-17. So any changes to the actual council tax set by the council, that increase, it will not increase the amount the SRA gets, it will not decrease the amount the Somerset Rivers Authority gets.
I think I'm happy with that. I'll go to Benty. Oh, sorry. Okay, Henry Hobhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A little bit of nitpicking, Mike. Actually, between 135 centimetres and 175 centimetres fell on the 9th of May, measured by the Newt in the high case and measured by the Met Office in the low case, not 10 centimetres. That's a minor problem. My major problem is the effect of building and roads on the flooding in Somerset. And in this particular case, I'm going to pull out the 303, both the new and the old works. In the case of the old works, Blackdown, which is not in my division, has all the water coming into it from off of the 303 with no control about how it comes off, where it's held or anything else. And this particular problem is now being exacerbated for Podimore, where the new ponds are all emptied into exactly the same place on the 303 to the other side of the road to Podimore, and all the drains are blocked from the old works, which are supposed to take the water away. That is been exacerbated in the last 3 months, where Lymington, Podimore, and Yeovilton have all been cut off on the roads completely for more than 48 hours in most cases. And that's the River Yeo, not the River Cam. And we need to have some sort of strategy where communities which are being cut off because the roads are too heavily flooded have a way of reporting in and some form of vehicle. In the case of Lymington, they had to carry people out on the back of tractors to get in and out. And it's become 5 times in the last 3 months. And this is entirely climate change. I understand things are changing very quickly. And just for your information, on 2008, we had the second highest level in Western Bamfield when the rain fell on West Camel, not higher up the level. And it was 2 meters then and 3 meters in the 9th of May. This is not a criticism. This is me asking for help for my villages where we have got new and changing conditions which are not being met by the EA, which I have met on site and been talking to them. I've also reported this at length to the Highway Authority, and again, it's not being met there. Thank you.
Would you, David, are you able to respond? Would you wish to respond to that? And just before you do, you did actually mention Mike, who's declared an interest, and I know he is. I know he is, but he's declared an interest. But because you've mentioned him, I think he's within his rights to provide an answer.
I wouldn't have mentioned it if I didn't want an answer.
That's very good of you. Thank you for considering that. But I'm going to bring in David first, if I may.
My Somerset Rivers Authority response to Henry's Councillor Hobhouse, comments are to reiterate the point that the Somerset Rivers Authority is a partnership of all the organisations that are already involved in looking at the issues around the Cam Valley and the River Yeo and the flooding that has happened. And what the SRA can do is, once those partners have all had time to consider potential solutions and think about what they will be able to take forward as business as usual, if appropriate, they can then come forward to the Somerset Rivers Authority and put in a proposal for grant funding, which, if successful, can then help tackle some of those problems. But there's a lot of ifs in there. But just trying to reiterate the point that the organisations you need involved in addressing those issues, firstly, they're already looking at it. They're all part of the SRA, and if appropriate, we can possibly help in the future. That's probably about as much as I can say on that.
Thank you very much. Mike.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hobhouse, for acting as my personal PR agency this morning. Yeah, David has answered the question perfectly. I mean, Henry, your summary of flood situation effect of climate change is dead right, and we're struggling with it all the time. When the Rivers Authority was set up after the 2014 floods, which primarily affected the Levels and Moors Delta and Moorland, it was its remit said it had to provide extra protection against flooding for the whole of Somerset, which is indeed what's been happening. What's new or has changed in scale, certainly in the last 2 years, is all these flash floods all over the place, including the ones you mentioned, but also up at Milverton and the Quantocks and lots of places, which are a quite different kind of flood effect. But the issues you raise are all to do with national highways. Some of them may be local highways. Drain clearance is one of the fundamental problems. And you may have noticed on one of the slides David put up that there were 2 lines of extra funding for drain clearance and jetting of culverts, which actually, in a way, the Rivers Authority shouldn't be funding because it should be being done within the budget of Highways Department and National Highways. But we've done it over several years just because, if those gullies and culverts don't get cleared, then you get even more serious floods. So yeah, to put it in slightly different words from the way David put it, the route for the Rivers Authority to help solve those problems is for a bid for funding to be put in for a specified project, which would obviously need costings and details to how it would be done. And then the Rivers Authority Board would consider whatever the level of request was for the specific work and decide whether to award it. But with 3 million a year, we could spend 30 million a year for the next 5 years and still not solve the flooding problem. Some of you may have heard Radio 4 this morning. The professor of hydrology from Reading University was on, and she made the point that nowhere in the country will we ever be able to completely prevent flooding, because it's a kind of moving problem. You solve the flood problem in one place and then the rain falls in a different place for a different length of time. So sorry, long answer, but we're very happy to help, but it has to come in as a specific request, costed request, and then we can make a grant, because basically that's all we do is make grants.
Thank you, Mike. That's great. Councillor Penty-Height, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am glad to hear that you mentioned drain, because at a meeting we had in Shepton Mallet the other day, I said it's very important that even people go outside their front door, and if there is a drain, then clear it. It's amazing what is in there. And I ruined a pair of shoes because I couldn't walk on the pavement. It was that much underwater. So I had to go over to the drain and free it. But people has got to do that themselves. They got to do something. And by attacking the drains, you also help getting rid of the water so it doesn't run into people's houses. Shepton Mallet, a lot of houses hasn't got any foundation because a foot down you're on solid bedrock. So they will flood like there's no tomorrow. We should leave the rivers to run where they normally run and not interfere with it. But I want to know about money, because the last thing that people said to me yesterday was, Bente, we are dead against 5% on the county council tax of money to Rivers Authority. I'm sorry, the Rivers Authority back along, before you came back, did not have a very good reputation. So therefore, they will not like to give you any money. And also they do not want the government to give money because, and that is my point, government has not got money. They are borrowing taxpayers' money, and that's the whole point. It's the same taxpayers they are paying on all the levels. So I'm sorry, we don't want to see any increases from you, and basically the taxpayers are not happy paying it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there was a clarity there that they're not looking for more money. Am I right? Yes. Yeah. Okay. But I'll bring David back in to answer that.
Yeah, just to reiterate that point, that we're not requesting any additional funds. It will be the same 1.25% of the 16-17 council tax amount, which is about £16 a year, I think, per household. And so there'll be no increase on that requested from the SRA.
Dixie Darch, next, please.
Thank you, Chair. And just for anyone listening, I'm not a member of this committee, but I'm kind of sitting in, and I'm the climate change portfolio holder, and I'm kind of very interested in this discussion. So I want to pick up on a few things. So Councillor Height, the adopt a drain kind of policy, I think is brilliant. It's kind of impossible for the council to be out looking after every drain in sudden unexpected kind of rainfall. So I know in my community we've got people who kind of clear local drains, and that works really well. I will also say that when we have those really heavy downfalls, like Councillor Hobhouse was referring to, the drainage system just simply can't cope. It's not that the drains are blocked, there is just not the capacity. So we are in kind of much more difficult territory than we were some time ago. And I wanted also to pick up on, climate change has been mentioned, and the new strategy is the last strategy was written 10 years ago. That's right, isn't it, Mike? And that original strategy, it was a response to the 13-14 floods on the levels. Climate change was mentioned once, I think, so that has been completely changed in this new strategy. It is much more foregrounded, and there is also a catchment-based approach and that has been introduced. So we're looking at the upper catchment, the middle catchment, and the lower catchment, the levels. And there is, because we're getting this surface water flooding with the sudden flash floods, it's not just the levels at risk. It's, I think, like all over Somerset is at risk. People that I've spoken to, people who've been flooded, who've said, we've never ever been flooded before. It's really difficult. So, that precept comes from every Somerset resident, and all Somerset residents are affected by flooding. I would say that if my understanding of what David Mitchell is saying is that 3 million is not increasing. There's not a percentage increase that goes. In one sense, that our money goes less far now because of inflation and the cost of contractors, and some of this work is very expensive. So that's a bit of a downside of the kind of money staying where it is. But that catchment based approach allow that, there's that kind of recognition that, like, if you're flooding in one spot, what you do there impacts people downstream, and what happens upstream in fact. So I guess one of the positives of us being a unitary authority is that we're not really working in district boundaries anymore. We can actually look at the geography really and look at kind of where the water comes from and take a more joined up approach. Thank you.
Dave Mansell next, please.
Thank you. And I will remember to introduce myself, and it's for a reason. So Dave Mansell, and my division is Upper Tone. So, and there's a clue in the name of the division as to where we represent, and we're a source clearly of some of the water which comes down and goes down elsewhere. That said, we definitely have our flooding issues here, and they do feel like they're increasing. So flash flooding, and they're now feeling like annual as well. In fact, some of them are now annual, and they used to rarely occur in the past, but now literally every year we're getting an occurrence, and it's water coming off the fields and down the highway to where people live. And we had the bad example, as mentioned, of Milverton, where homes were flooded earlier in the year. But there's plenty of examples, and what we're often getting as well as part of this sometimes is flooding on the roads, but it's also in some places we're getting lots of mud and debris washed down as well, and that's occurring regularly. And so with Liscombe Town Council, now once a year outside the secondary school, inches thick in mud. Every year that now occurs. So it's definitely, these problems are definitely growing. Just on the funding issue, I think I should flag up that I think the work done by Somerset Rivers Authority, looking at the reports, what's been done, it's good work, it looks to me. And not only good work, it's important work. It's reducing the flood risk to us and tackling it. So I very much support the work that's being done, and for me, it's absolutely essential that this percentage that you get continues. Somerset needs this work to be done, so I strongly support it. I will admit I don't quite understand it. I know it's 1.25%. My guess is the question, of course, is 1.25% of what, and I think that's where we're slightly struggling. But I'm sure there's the formula somewhere. Somewhere has got a definition of what the what is, and I don't think, you know, how much difference it makes. I don't know. I'm not too anxious on that, because I wonder how much difference it makes. But I think the funding that has been given to the Rivers Authority, what I can see is being well spent. I may think some of the projects are better than others, but overall it looks like a good suite of projects here. So in terms of decision reports, my comment would be definitely to support what's going on and you know, adopt the new strategy and continue to go forward. Now, I'm a little unclear as far as presentations. I'm not sure whether we're getting a further presentation on what you're doing. Am I right to think that?
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely, yes.
So I may have some
Yeah.
further comments. I think perhaps we should wait to hear what you've got to say before other things
That would be
I
a good
may
idea,
say.
but
So-
I've got one more question. I think Rosemary, you had your hand up earlier.
When you say it affects the whole of Somerset, my own part of Somerset is in that part where the hills and the coast, there's not far between them. So that the attenuation that's happening in the hills is helping the coast. And I want that to continue, but it's not always obvious. And we've been fortunate really that it's the flooding on the roads, and we haven't had it so much in the housing, but the flooding on the roads has come and gone very quickly. And that's what we've got to watch. It's this hills to the coast flooding that we get. And I know we've got the Somerset levels, which takes longer to fill up, but it's still there. The whole thing is still there. And it's a worry that, you know, we're talking about when we started to have the flooding back in 2013-14, the problem hasn't gone away. It's just coming back every year. And that's what we want realisation of.
Thank you. Harry Munt, Councillor Harry Munt.
Thank you. As I said, I do sit on the Rivers Authority, so instead of these sounding like opinions, I guess I'll ask as questions. Are they the projects that were on the map? There's clearly absolutely loads of them. Would you consider them to be successful? From my experience, there have been new types of management for flood risk that wouldn't have been possible without the funding from the SRA. I think, would you agree with that? And the projects that it has funded has also delivered other climate change benefits, not just around flooding, and they have supported local schemes. Would you agree with that? Finally, the main point really is that if we don't keep this going, as Somerset Council is the main contributor to the funds that the SRA is able to deliver to projects, I assume the whole thing would stop. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll do my best to remember all of those. If I could start with the first one, has the projects been successful? Our view is very much they've been successful. They have delivered a whole variety of projects, from more traditional activities around dredging of rivers down in the levels of moors to lots and hundreds of projects in the upper catchment to slow the flow of water down into the lower catchments. Funding of highway works precisely has been mentioned, which is the reason we fund highway works a lot of the time is because of the economic impact of highway flooding as much as anything. The combination of activities together undoubtedly has improved the situation. Could I quantify that specifically? Unfortunately not, but I think we would generally be comfortable to say we have been successful. You've asked the point about, does the SRA enable new types of responses to some of the flood risks we experience? I would say it's more a case of many of our partners were already investing in a wide range of activities. What we've enabled them to do is do more of it. And on some occasions, particularly in the natural flood management, we've enabled Somerset to get a bit ahead of the rest of the country by investing extra money in there. WAG's Farming Wildlife Advisory Group Southwest has won awards for how much work they do, funded by the SRA in the upper catchments, mid catchment things. So it's been, it's not necessarily enabling our partners to do lots of new things, but it has enabled them to do a lot more things. Your question on, as Somerset Council raises the funding for the Rivers Authority, if that funding is not raised, would the SRA stop? It would definitely have to change what it did, because we wouldn't have any funding to allocate, so we would not be able to enable more projects. We could continue as a partnership, but without funding, obviously the impact of that partnership would be significantly reduced. And was there another question? Oh yeah, as part of the process of assessing projects, we do look for additional benefits. So we encourage projects to deliver habitat enhancements. We encourage them to consider the impact their project will have on climate change. It's so what we always try to do, whilst risks, flooding is a key focus, we do always try to encourage projects that deliver multiple benefits, and some of that is around climate change. I think.
At this stage, we've got, well, yeah, and we're getting a lot of questions. We've still got a second part of this presentation to go. That you want a direct answer to that? Do you mind holding your question until the end, Alan? Got a pen? I've got two others, and this is actually quite a long section. I think it could wait. Yes, well, I'm going to let Mike back in, and if you don't mind, I'll hold that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a bit of evidence that I got yesterday, actually, on to answer Harry's question about the effectiveness of what we've done over the last 9 years or so. And you'll remember that the trigger for the SRA was the 2013-14 flooding of Moorland, North Moor Green, Fordgate area on the levels. And there's a particular farmer who was very vocal then and on the television a lot about what needed to be done. He was on television again January last year when we had a near flooding of those areas, but they didn't flood. And I was talking to him yesterday because I'm also on the Parrot internal drainage board, which he's also on. And I asked him what he thought in the light of the recent rainfall this year, was his assessment of the effectiveness of what we've done. And he said, oh yeah, it's clear that it's worked. Otherwise we might have flooded this year. Now, that's a view. It's very difficult to disentangle the variables, because if you look at those three events, 2014, 2023, 2024, almost the same amount of rainfall in the first and the last one, a bit less in January last year. But it fell in slightly different places and for different periods. So in January 2014, the rain fell over about a 6-week period, and the villages were flooded for 6 weeks. At the end of 2023 and into January this year, it's been more like a 12-week period. So you know, that will have had a mitigating effect. So it's very, very difficult to show exactly what consequence you get from what defences you put in place. But generally, certainly, there's a local feeling that what's been done has worked.
Thank you. My point is really the second part of your presentation might answer some questions that may be in the offing. So if we proceed with that, then we'll come back to the other questions.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we might well have touched on some things already. So the second part of my presentation is just around the Somerset Rivers Authority is in the process of developing a new strategy and action plan. And the reason for that is, as we've touched on, is the flood action plan is now 10 years old. It wasn't written for the Somerset Rivers Authority. We came out of it. What we're looking to develop now is very much a strategy and action plan specifically for the Somerset Rivers Authority. And rather than looking back towards a specific event, it's about looking forward to what is coming towards us and lets us look more strategically about where we maybe want to invest our funding in the future. Next slide, please. So just to give you, we have been working on this for a while, too long. Probably it's taken longer than we had hoped to get where we are now, but we've been working on it for at least the past 18 months and really pressing on with it in the last few months. And we actually started to go out to public engagement on our draft strategy in mid-November last year. Hopefully all councillors, well, we did send out emails to all councillors to make them aware of our website for commenting on our new strategy. We published it, publicised it through our own social media, through our partners' social media. We got some interest from the press, and we put out a couple of adverts. We also put it through the library network so people could access information in the library network as well. And over that period, with the website being live, 10,500 visits to the website, which we're quite happy with. Those figures are slightly different from section 4.3 in your report because I have updated them since the report was published. On the website, we also had an interactive map where people could tell us about issues they were concerned about, very localised issues, and we've had 250 issues logged. So we're very pleased with the engagement we've had with the website. But unfortunately, the actual number of responses to the surveys on there are lower than we would have liked. When I checked this morning, there was about 160 odd responses to the survey, which obviously it's a bit disappointing. We've not converted as many interactions on the website into fully completing the survey responses. However, we have had a lot of good responses, a lot of good detailed input, and that will inform the rest of the work that we do. So just next slide, please. So what are we trying to achieve with our strategy and action plan? Well, as I said, it's very much about looking forward, and what we're aiming to have by the time we've completed it is very much a document that when an individual picks it up and reads it, because it is actually, for a strategy document, quite an easy read. We want people to really understand why the SRA was set up, how it is different from our partner organisations like the risk management authorities and other organisations working in the field. But really, we want people to understand what we were set up to achieve and how we are going to achieve it. I hope that by the time people have read the finalised strategy and action plan, when they've gone through it, they are absolutely convinced that we will achieve what we have said we want to achieve. And that's very important to us. So moving on to a bit more, next slide, please, Steph, thanks. Just in terms of really summarising what is in the strategy. This is essentially the nuts and bolts of the strategy in one slide, but I don't expect you to read all those words, so don't worry. The main thing that I really want to pull out of our strategy is just absolutely emphasising we were set up to address or reduce the risks and impacts of flooding across Somerset. We want to deliver as many benefits as we possibly can through our funding, but everything we fund and support should have at its core that it is achieving this point of reducing the risks and impacts of flooding. So next slide. And the way in which we will focus our attention, our funding, our efforts is by thinking about our core principles, which is very much, as we've kind of touched on with the discussion, it's about we were set up to do extra. We were set up in a partnership, so we want to do things absolutely in a partnership way. And we want to be acting on local priorities. Now, what do we mean by that? Because obviously our partner organisations are already thinking locally and acting locally. What we mean by that is the SRA is a non-statutory body. We are not quite as tied into national policy and diktats from the likes of DEFRA and others. So our partner organisations can be maybe a bit more innovative using the SRA's money and maybe look at things in a very localised way that they might not be able to do otherwise. So that's very important to us. Next slide. Now, through our strategy, looking back at what we've achieved so far and thinking about the lessons that we have learned from how we've operated so far, worked through partners, what has worked well, what has not worked maybe quite so well. It's then helped to shape how we want to do things in the future. So we're developing these ideas for themes. And we strongly believe that by working with our partners, and if we work within these kind of thematic areas and join them together, so we're working across themes as well, we will ultimately deliver projects that tackle flood risk, but also kind of deliver lots of multiple benefits. So our feeling is, and I think we describe it in the strategies as this, it's the combination of our principles and working across these themes that will very much provide a unique imprint, a unique fingerprint of SRA funded activities. And we hope that they will be really deliver multiple benefits for all our partners and the community. Finally, next slide. Coming out of our strategy, if you have a read through it, you will see that the objectives that were set ourselves, if you took the time to read those and look back at the flood action plan objectives, what you'll see is that they are not fundamentally different. We did a lot of work looking at the objectives, and there was a general consensus that they were broadly correct. But what it is, it's a bit of an evolution, and these ones are very specific to the Somerset Rivers Authority, and we will work through our principles and our themes and working in partnership and taking local decisions. We will work hard to deliver against those objectives, and this is how we will test whether or not we've been successful. And just on to our final slide, Dixie, Councillor Dart, did a great job of already introducing this. We're very explicitly talking about taking a more catchment approach to planning the types of projects we will fund in the future. All of the partners within the SRA are already working at that catchment scale, thinking about how things all link together. This is more about the Somerset Rivers Authority taking the opportunity to understand the various catchments from an SRA perspective. We want to do extra, so we want to understand in the catchments what is already happening, so we can identify the gaps and fund extra activities. And it's very much about understanding what we can do in the upper lower catchments, how it will all come together to ultimately deliver more integrated solutions, multiple benefits, very much outcome focused. This element of the strategy is very much under development at the minute, and we'll be reporting on that to the board in mid-February. And that was a whistle-stop tour of our strategy and action plan, and I hope you've had a chance to read it, and if not, please do so, and if you have any detailed comments you want to provide, drop me an email.
Thank you very much, David. That's very good. I'm going to come back to Alan to see if he's remembered his question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My brother Tony is the chairman of the Parrot Drainage Board. I thought I'd better say something. I want people to start talking and think, well, he hadn't got much to say. I think about it sometimes, and Councillor Stanton said something very relevant there 10 minutes ago, how it has improved the Moorland, Foregate area, Currymore, etc. Currymore, no. I'll touch on that in a minute. I'll touch on that one, but it has improved. I've lived that area for 77 years on the edge of Northmore, etc., and I know exactly what I'm talking about. Used to flood, used to go away, flood, go away, and that's how it used to be. Used to go duck shooting, tops of the gateposts during the winter. That's how things were, sailing. And there wasn't no such things then as river authorities and all the rest of it. It's the old days I'm on about, and people accepted it because the silt came down from the uplands. You'd never used any fertilizer on your lowland fields because most of it washed off the fields and came down, settled. Grass would grow naturally, and that's how it was. But I'm not going to go into that. That's all. But I'm going to mention A361, Currymore. In my opinion, a lot of that water on Currymore could be got off a lot quicker. All you want is some big pipes across that A361, not shut it down when there's a bit of water there ankle deep. Straight down through, and you've got them massive pumps you've installed at Foregate, Moorland. And the way they were working 2014, 2015, if that was to happen, you would take a lot of pressure off the rest of the areas, Langport area out through, because if I'm going to be totally honest now, I think somebody else have had the water this year. You've had a lot more rain, but somebody else have had it. So something have happened somewhere, right? I look down from up there and I can look it over and see all the water shining, but it's not up here, it's more out there. I think if Currymore was relieved, and I'm sure it could be with a lot of effort and a bit of money spent, that water coming under the A361, straight down through to the Reen, to the pumping station at Foregate, which is a massive pumps, that is, massive pumps. If anybody hadn't seen them, it would pay to go and have a look. And when they actually work, the water it sends out, it's absolutely remarkable. Only one issue, the River Parrot, it's a tidal river. So you can only pump out when it's going out to sea. When it's coming in, and that's half the problem with a lot of these pumps now, because you can only operate them when the tide works with you. Otherwise, you're having your own back all the time. Sorry to use that saying, but you know, but people don't realise that those rivers are on a tidal system, and until they're good to keep pumping water in when it's coming in, you got to get it when it's going out. And if anybody hasn't been to that system and looked around when it's flooded and all them pumps working, there's something you're really missing. But they've got an awful lot right this year. But I do think somebody else have had it. And I'm going to bring up, Mike, while I'm here, you started a scheme of which you were drawing some funding for, is that right? A river scheme? Have I got my facts right or not? Something's been started and it ain't going to be complete. Is that?
Mike, yeah.
Sorry,
Is that's a
I'll keep
question
quiet.
through the
You're
chair to
more-
Mike?
Right, I have to bring it up. It's
The
so
question
important.
through the chair to Mike. Do you want him to answer that now?
I'm sorry. Okay. That's a
No,
lot.
that's all right. Yeah, okay, I'll get him to answer.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. And funnily enough, I spent 2.5 hours yesterday, as did David with your brother, at the IDB offices, debating just that question about the work that isn't finished, and how we get it done. I mean, all the points you've raised, as I think you know, are to do with the Environment Agency and to do with highways. Again, the Rivers Authority could help solve the problem if the proper requests for grants were put in. But the A361, there's been endless debate about that and about the amount of water to be held on Westmore. Westmore is a storage area, so, you know, it was meant to hold water. The question is how much and how long for. But that's really a matter that the Environment Agency and Highways Department will have to solve. And as I said, they can come to us for a grant for it. The work that has not been finished is 1 3/4 miles of embankment of the King Sedgemoor Drain. I think that's what you're referring to. And that was supposed to be finished year before last. The Environment Agency, as Dixie will remember very well, suddenly decided that they needed an extra £2.3 million, I think it was, to get it finished, having already asked us for an extra 600,000, then an extra 800,000, which we provided. And when they asked for the final 2.3 million, we said no. It was a very long debate among council officers in what was then Somerset County Council and the Rivers Authority officers. And so what we were discussing yesterday, and I have to be a bit careful what I say because some of this isn't finally decided yet, but the board on Friday at its board meeting, the Rivers Authority board, will be hearing a report as to how we will get that piece finished. I mean, I hope we can get it done this summer. It's possible that it will have to wait till next summer. And that's rather dependent on contractor availability and weather and how wet the ground is, and so on, which the Drainage Board Chief Exec and Chief Engineer is working on very actively at the moment. So, but we've been very clear at the board, those works will get finished. It's just a question of who does it and when.
Thank you. David, would you like to reply to that? Anything to add?
I think Councillor Stanton has covered everything. Yeah.
I think it was Henry. Steve, did you have your hand up earlier? I think Henry, Steve, and then I'll come back to Dave. Was anybody else? Have I missed somebody? Oh, yeah, you did. Edric and then Dave. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things. Firstly, can we ensure that when your officers come into divisions, they actually talk to the members? It is important for when you're trying to do things. I have a meeting with Paul Elliston later this week on that, because he's doing stuff in my division and he hadn't actually talked to me before it happened. It's not important, it just is allows us to understand what's happening. The second thing is that it is quite obvious that there are houses who are going to flood annually now. And it is important that those houses defend themselves. Now, in 2008, we were lucky in that the council then had some money, and West Camel, which has a stream running straight through the middle of the village, got £350,000 in grant from the county council to look at and give to individual houses to defend them. In May this year, those defences were overcome because the wave that went down the Cam was 5 foot high and they were defended to 3 feet. Myself and the flood defence chairman for Queen Camel, which has another set of houses which flood every year, are in the process of writing a booklet which is headed How to Defend Your Own House. Now, there are a number of things that householders should know and understand. The first and foremost, they are very expensive, but there are doors, front doors, which will lock and completely stop the water coming in through the front door. that doesn't protect your walls or your air bricks or your what am I trying to say? Damp course, all of which will leak through and it will come through the floors as well. The point I'm trying to get at here is one of the things that your organisation is trying to do is to help people with flooding, and where we need to make sure that across Somerset that booklet is available, if that makes sense. Because at the end of the day, you ain't ever going to protect West Camel or Queen Camel or a number of other places in Somerset, and you need to tell them. And just so everybody knows, the National Farmers Union Insurance are paying half the cost of the waterproof doors on the ground that it is a better defence when they are insured with the NFU than not having any defence at all.
Yes, David.
I'll entirely take on board your point, Councillor Hophouse, about contacting councillors when we're working in your areas. That's perfectly understandable. And just to mention about some of what you said there about working in communities, you've mentioned your meeting with Paul Elliston. He's one of 2 community resilience and engagement officers at the SRA funds, and they work hard to try and increase knowledge and help communities be better prepared. But take on board what you say about your leaflet as well.
Thank you. Next, I've got Councillor Steve Ashton.
Yes, I would like to see more justification of the money spent against a decent model and baselining. Just sort of mentions from a farmer saying that, oh, it wasn't quite so wet this year, doesn't seem to justify the huge amounts of money that's spent here. We were flooded for the first time ever, not flash flooding from River Parrett, actually came into our house for the first time. And we believe that's almost a direct consequence of the SRA work that's happened just upstream of us. And certainly my neighbour was certainly flooded because of some work done in Merriott in December. So I would like to see, rather than, I mean, these are huge amounts of money being spent, this large percentage of the money of people in Somerset. So some explanation of the baselining, the modelling, the quantifiable benefits of this money being spent, because none of that's being presented here at all. No quantifiable benefits here at all. I just think it's this approach of saying, well, we'll do a little bit of local work here and a little bit of local work here. I'd like to see someone explain that certain bits of work has resulted in this benefit, because spending this money, sort of money elsewhere, would always require that.
An answer, David?
Yeah, I mean, I can reassure Councillor Ashton that through the process of grant proposals, we assess the benefits and impacts of our proposals. We do take a less rigorous approach than maybe a government business, a government funding would require. We rely upon the technical expertise of our partner organisations who help us assess those proposals, assess what the benefits will be and what the potential downsides of those things will be. For some projects, some of the larger projects, there is modelling that has been undertaken in the past to understand what the impacts will be and what the rationale is for the solution. But for smaller interventions such as natural flood management projects in the upper catchments or mid catchments, the cost to model some of those types of interventions would be disproportionately high compared to the cost of the scheme. So it's trying to strike a good balance between getting projects on the ground based upon technical expertise and knowledge versus making our grant funding process kind of so kind of more akin to your normal government funding processes that is off-putting towards people coming forward to try and deliver some of those smaller interventions. But I entirely take your point that our evidence base for the success or otherwise of our projects, it needs to be there, and we need to communicate that more effectively if we're not doing that at the minute. So I take that on board.
I'm going to come back to Edric, please. Councillor Edric Hobbs, thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to be reassured that funding is available and work done on the smaller rivers. I mean, this isn't my division, but it's the division I live in. I live in Shepton Mallet, and we were affected badly by flooding again last week, as Councillor Height would have testified, because it's her division. And I was out there with other councillors, sort of knee deep in water, trying to help people. So although I think lots of this work, and rightly so, gets spent on the Parrot and the Brew and the Tone, there are many small rivers, like Henry says, things like, you know, in West Camel, and the devastation that the Sheppey flooding, it starts as a tiny stream 2 miles away in St Aldham as well, in Dolting. Time it gets to Shepton, what's that, Benty? Less than 2 miles. Time it comes down the valley, it caused devastation. It flooded factories and homes in the valley, and I was going to ask you to comment, because I know you commented at the LCN where we raised flooding as an issue the other day, and I'd just like to make sure that research work and reports, I believe a report was done in the Mendip area. And I was going to ask Benty if she wanted to come in, but I didn't want to name you. But since you mentioned it, I think it's important that the smaller, the little rivers that maybe most of you don't even know where they are. We all know where the Brew and the Tone and the Parrot are. We can see them. I can see them from the Mendips flooding the area. But just want to make sure the same attention is applied to the smaller communities, which I appreciate don't flood every year, but when they do flood, it is devastating. And Councillor Height, having been a councillor in Shepton for longer than me, will probably testify more to this than I do. So I'm probably speaking slightly out of turn about not my division, but also as a town councillor for that parish. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just ask Councillor Height to reiterate what she said. You were off mic and I didn't quite catch what you said. I know Edric did, just to.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I just said that River Sheppey is, as Councillor Hub said, just a little spring on the way to Froome on a little hillside. That is where it starts. But when it used to run into Shepton and pull over 110 mils by the time it disappeared to Croscombe, it has been forced in to be a little stream, and then it was forced. Then they did things to it that also to give life to fish. And now they dumped supermarket trolleys and things like that has not been cleared for years. But that is not the river authorities' problem. That is whoever should have done it. But a river that will have water. Oh, we forgot to mention, Edric, that there is 2 sluices, one by the cider factory and one further out. And when they open their sluices, when they get too much water, then poor River Sheppey in the center of the town, or down below the center of town, but the medieval road into Shepton, that floods. And that's where all the houses has got no foundation. They don't stand a chance. And it's just out there, and then keep the water away for how many hours it lasts, and then you stand a chance.
Maybe is that noted, or do you want to come back on that?
I can't comment on the very specific issues raised, but I can reassure Councillor Hobbs that, as we saw from the map earlier, the SRA is funding large and small projects right across the county. The catchment approach we're taking is about understanding all the issues locally, but just to reiterate again that we are a partnership, and we need organisations to bring proposals to us, and we can then consider them and then help address. One final thing I'd just like to say, Chair, sorry, is I just want to kind of emphasise the point about I flagged up the fact that the SRA can fund extra as a virtue. It absolutely is a virtue, and it's a real benefit to us. However, extra is also can be a challenge for our partners. They are absolutely maxed out on business as usual, trying to deliver a whole suite of works. So I do not underestimate the challenges it is for them to also deliver extra works on behalf of the Somerset Rivers Authority. So just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you. Councillor Mansell, please.
All right, thank you. A few comments and I'll finish with a question. So just sort of in the generality of the report, I said earlier, I certainly think you're doing good and important work. Some of the things which I see as particularly beneficial and good, the natural flood management work that's being done, that's good to see, and I do believe is an important contribution to what's happening. And the fact that you're looking at that in the context as well of further benefits that can be provided by diversity, etc. That's I'm very pleased to hear that. I have to say, I'm also pleased to hear that you're contributing to highways maintenance work in terms of helping with clearing some gullies, you know, jetting and so on. And it is additional work and it's needed. You know, and in some ways it's regrettably that, you know, our highways weren't able to do all the maintenance needed, but they're not able to do all the maintenance needed. And even still, you know, it's clear that they're way behind what needs to happen, and that's contributing to flooding issues undoubtedly. So I am pleased to see that you're helping out by providing some extra that is sorely needed, and we fear maybe even more needed after further budget cuts that may occur. So I did particularly wish to draw attention to those. I was sort of going to measure what I was calling measuring and monitoring. So I would like to sort of, you know, agree very much to the point that Steve made about, you know, how things are being measured. And I will make this just a comment rather than a question because you've addressed it. But I've still got this feeling that there does need to be a little bit more I'm not quite thought of the words, but it is something with numbers, modelling, something, you know, where we can understand what is being achieved by this. It doesn't have to be everything, because I also take on board what you were saying about, you know, supporting natural flood management things and not making it onerous and, you know, making the bureaucracy behind it more costly than the project that's being delivered. That clearly isn't something that was wanted. But nevertheless, I do think there is some work that needs to be done so we can understand more what benefit is being achieved and, you know, can see that it's real. So I'll leave that as a comment. So question, sort of looking at the flooding issues that we have in our area, and we're, you know, a higher upper area, and I mentioned earlier we're getting a lot washed off fields, which means mostly farmers' fields, and it sort of feels to me that more work is needed with them. It's sort of done at a targeted level, and that's good. It's fairly limited. I am wondering whether there's even a bigger bit of work here to try and get the message out into the farming community, and sort of what I see, and, you know, I've not got any real expertise, but bits picking up, and I think, you know, they're the obvious ones, but some of it is due to with farming methods and some of what's occurring there, and maize particularly mentioned, and it's amazing how often potatoes end up in floodwater, so there must be something there as well, so sort of farming methods, what's done there. Something else though that also hearing is, you know, some farms are putting down a lot of hard standing, a lot of barns, concrete roads and tracks, and then the water is channeling off these and ending up elsewhere, and that appears to be an issue. And I've got one particular example in mind, but I think it's a general point as well. And thirdly, something that said that there's increasing number of contractors working on farms, and they're just coming in, doing the job they're paid to do and going off and not quite caring about the wider consequences as much as they perhaps should do. So there's a few issues there, but in general, the problem of, you know, water being washed off fields, and you know, that is a key source of it. So can you say a little bit more, you know, what you're doing there, and perhaps, you know, should there be more done, especially at the wider farming community level? Thanks.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, I mentioned FWAG, Farming Wildlife Advisory Group Southwest, earlier, and that they deliver all of natural flood management project, or a lot of our natural flood management projects. Another thing that we fund them to do is actually specifically working with landowners and farmers, and to talk to them about land management practices which will reduce flood risks. So encouraging them to plant overcrops in the winter, and things like ploughing the field differently so it doesn't sheet or run off downhill. All those things do already happen. Another thing we do is we fund highway referrals, so that encourages our highway colleagues, where there's a flooding issue that is because of runoff, they can then communicate with FWAG, who will then go and work with the landowner to try and encourage them to do things differently. And that activity is taking place right across the whole county. Now, there's only so much that FWAG can do with the officers that they have. So take on just making the case the SRA is already operating or supporting their partners to operate in that area. I'm sure there is more could be done, but that would maybe be a future conversation with FWAG, whether they wanted to propose additional funding if that was something they felt was doable and supported.
Thanks very much. I've got one more question from Alan.
It's not really a question, it's a couple of statements, actually, Mr. Chairman. And the pick up from the one farmer who benefited from what was happening at Northmoreland area this year. The whole area's benefited. Everybody's benefited, householders, because the 361 has been kept open. There's an awful lot of benefits from what has happened this year. And credit to everyone. It's one step forward, not just one farmer, but that's the one that shouts the loudest. So that's the one's going to be known. And secondly, I'm going to bring up a few farming issues. You thought I would, didn't you? But in the last 10 years, farming has changed. We've gone towards a non-ploughing aspect because of the release of carbon. You've gone to direct drilling, right? So your soil is firm all the time. So when it rains, the water, where does it go to? Don't go into the soil, at the gateway. When you plough, you open the field up. You aerate the soil. That's what I was always taught. I went to agricultural college, and I think I know what I'm talking about. You aerate the soil. All of a sudden, that's a dirty word to plough. A dirty word. But one farmer in the Farmers Weekly just did comment the fact that he'd done some ploughing this year, and all his best crops this year were land he ploughed. And do you know why that was? Because the land drained, right? Not many till the top 2 or 3 inches. So when it rains, it's something at the gateway, etc., etc. And you might be glad of farmers, yeah, with all these cuts going. You might be glad of a couple of farmers in each village to save you a few shillings, because most of this water in villages come in and it can't go out because outlets aren't being maintained. That is everywhere. If people know the area, the local areas, you get silt coming down, etc., etc. And every outlet is blocked. There's no ifs, no buts, right? It takes a very bold man sometimes to put his digger in it, put it out. What a difference it makes. We had an issue in Petherton 5 or 6 years ago. 2:30 in the morning, the place was flooded. 2:30 in the morning. This is a simple one, I said, but a common sense needed here. I took out 3 grids that hadn't been maintained, and they were holding all the rubbish. And the minute the grids filled up, we got a backlog and houses were flooding. I took those grids out then. I still got them on the farm now, and they haven't been replaced. And we haven't had a flooding issue since. But I took it in my own hands to do what I thought was right. But you are going to want the farmers, right? Because, and there's less and less of them, right? And you're better off keeping on the right side of them, because they'll save you hundreds and thousands of pounds. It is snowing. Who do you get to first when it starts getting snowed in? It's easy years ago. You had 20 or 30 farmers in most village. Now you've only got a couple of farmers. So you really got to look after those guys. And I still reiterate the fact what I said, that plough has been replaced by mini tilling, shallow cultivation. And you know what I'm talking about, don't you? I could carry on for a lot. I'm quite passionate about it. I always thought it was the wrong thing to do when it came in, right? You know, and I think it is more than ever now. When I see that in Farmers Weekly this week, this man done 300 acres of wheat this year, and he's all survived the floods and the wet weather because his fields are drained, it's aerated, not planted in the top 2 or 3 inches. So when the rain came, the roots flooded, vegetation, and that was it. And that was the end of it. I won't say no more, Mr. Chairman.
I'm always pleased to hear from you. I regard you as our agricultural correspondent, and
well, I don't mind being called that at all.
And
that's one of the better names.
you do actually come up with. I mean, there's not many of us around the table can actually come up with that hands-on experience.
Grassroots knowledge into it, right?
Yeah.
Because that will always be like that. You aren't going to change things sometimes, you know.
But I'm more particularly pleased that you've put Councillor Mansell in his place.
There's only one problem, Mr. Chairman. The time he's finished, I've almost forgot what I'm going to say.
Of this banter, I think, David, is there anything you'd like to say? Because I'm calling this to an end now, this issue. Oh, Dixie, I beg your pardon. Right, okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Did you want to respond to that first?
Just to reassure Councillor Bradford that WAG are doing a lot of work funded by the SRA to aid in the issues mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Right. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to ask the expertise through you, what do we do when we have got fields with grazing animals because it's bedrock and we can't plow?
I think that's such a huge question. I mean, I'll take that as rhetorical because I don't think we can answer that issue here. It's too, well, 1 minute to answer it then.
Something happened 20 years ago in agriculture, which is called single farm payments, right? And a lot of people plowed grassland, and it really should never have been plowed because the subsidy payments encourage, we wanted food, et cetera, and it went away from stock production to more arable production, growing corn, maize in particular, possibly. And that's, if a lot of those fields could be put back like they were, then a lot of these things, just take the Quantocks, had to change in my lifetime. From grass fields to arable fields. There was a time you wouldn't see an arable field on the Quantocks. Now they grow seed potatoes there, et cetera, because of heights in sea levels, all to do with viruses. You hear that one, Dave? Right? And it makes a heck of a difference sometimes. And it's all changed, the whole concept of agriculture. And perhaps a few things being done wrong. They've encouraged the wrong things to be done. And how you put it back like it probably should be, I really don't know. And that maize production is one heck of a change to what happens. One heck of a change. But you all have cheap milk, and you can buy 4 pints of milk to a pint of beer now that you can. So, and this is why the maize, you get cheap milk for the maize production. If you didn't have maize, I don't know what the price of milk would be like, if I'm honest.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to
I
stop.
know, but there's no, no, I had one more hand, Henry.
I'm very bad at turning the mic on. Alan, I'm very sorry, but I'm just going to remind you of something. During the Second World War, almost every single acre of Somerset was ploughed up to produce vegetables. And this was not a big change that's happened lately. This is a previous change that happened in 1940. It also happened when we became vehicular as opposed to horses in the 20s and the 30s. Farming is always changing. Now reference your gateway and your flooding. If your gateway's at the bottom of the field, it will flood onto the road. If your gateway's at the top of the field, it won't flood out the gateway. All right? Sorry about that.
Thank you, Dixie. Well, and I think you can continue that conversation outside of this, please. Dixie, to complete this debate, please.
Yep, kind of final say, and I'll make it quick. I think that the agricultural farming conversation, it has been the subject of 3-day conferences, and so I'm not going to add to that. I really wanted to pick up on Councillor Ashton's point about the need for kind of evaluation of some of the interventions. And one thing I would say that it's interesting what David was saying about the cost because of the complexity of evaluating some of the natural flood management interventions would kind of be more than implementing them. What I would say is that there has been some really good research by Professor Nick Chappell at Lancaster University looking at natural flood management methods, and there is lots of hard data and evidence to say that it is effective alongside all of the other things that we need to do. So it's not a standalone thing. So I think the SRA could lean to that existing research rather than trying to kind of carry out research on their individual thing. And I think I'm really sorry to learn about your own flooding experience, Steve. And I know certainly in my village, we have been asked to report, individual instances of flooding, and that kind of feeds back in, that data is captured. And so those local events that would allow us to look at what the causes might be, and it's interesting. I'd be interested to know what you think was the cause of that problem. So I think kind of capturing that data is kind of those systems are in place, and I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David, is there anything you want to finish on?
If it's okay with you, Chair, I was just going to offer to follow up with a short paragraph to better explain how the SRA is funded, because I fear I confused people more than I helped them with my explanation on that one.
but please do. Oh, I know we've got one issue to discuss, one more agenda item. I'm conscious we've been sitting here for quite some time. Does anybody need a comfort break? Well, I do. And I've been up early this morning to get here, and I haven't got a deputy here to cover for me. So rather than hold you all up, I'll call in. It's Mike Cowdell. Mike, I'm not ignoring you, but I'm going to use the loo while you are speaking, if that's all right.
Shall I crack on? Yes, okay. Well, so hi everyone, my name is Michael Cowell. I work for Waste Services, and I'm just here today to talk a little bit about the flexible plastics trial that's taken place in Somerset since last May. I think just to start, just kind of give you a little bit of a background in terms of the in terms of the reasons why this trial was undertaken. Effectively, the government have been looking to kind of adopt a more kind of consistent approach in terms of what materials are recycled across the country. And they're looking to roll this out to all authorities within England by March 26. I think we're kind of relatively fortunate in Somerset that the majority of these materials we already collect. I think on consistent recycling as well, one of the main drivers behind it is to ensure that packaging producers can contribute consistently via a central fund to the collection and treatment of waste materials. And again, that's due to take place from March 26. As part of the consistent recycling scheme, there's a requirement to collect flexible plastics. This material has not been historically collected within the UK, and yeah, so this material's not been historically being collected widely within the UK, and it's been recognised by industry and RAP as a material stream that requires further investigation and a little bit of stimulation, both through the kind of back end reprocessing in terms of how this polyethylene polypropylene material is actually reprocessed, and as well as understanding the implications of collecting this material on behalf of the collecting authority. So in order to test the infrastructure and collection methodologies, DEFRA, UK Research and Innovation, and the Future of Plastics Fund. The Future Plastic Funds, they're a fund contributed by manufacturers of this material, partnered with a range of waste collection companies to undertake some trial work to understand what the challenges of the collection of this material is and was. So this trial was done across a number of authorities in England. The pilot phase was kind of very very small scale, and this was extended to a slightly larger discovery phase, which Somerset were part of. And the key outcomes of the trial were really just to understand how the collection of flexible plastics could be incorporated into different curbside methodologies, what the likely volumes that we would collect of this material are, and participation and establishing the end markets of flexible plastics also to understand what the right methods of communication were and are, what the right communication processes should be, understanding actually what works to members of the public, and also, and quite importantly, kind of understanding what the cost of the collection and the processing of this material is. In terms of our own trial, the communication strategy was done on a two-step approach as mandated by WRAP's best practice. So initially there's a warm-up communication that said we're going to introduce a new service here, and then a little bit later on, 2-3 weeks later on, there's a kind of there's more complex and detailed instructions that detailed the materials being collected. You know, in this instance, it was plastic bags, confectionery wrappers, forward-line plastic food wrapping, and bubble wrap and cling film, and told the householders how this material would be collected from the curbside. In terms of what was done, we provided a supply of kind of clear blue transparent plastic bags, and these were to be presented alongside the recycling collection and incorporated into that service. Also around the same time, we held kind of drop-in sessions for local residents. If they've got any kind of questions, we held drop-in sessions so that they could join. So the trial started in May, and this was rolled out to about 3,500 properties in and around Frome. Frome was specifically chosen to help complement the wider trial's demographic profile. So they're looking for kind of rural, high density-ish places to test this trial on, and Frome was kind of fitted that profile. We then delivered the bags, and the bags were then collected on the cycle around. In terms of outcomes from the trial, we had really good participation. So about 65% of residents participated in the flexible in presenting flexible plastics, and across kind of each collection cycle, we're picking about 500 kilos of this material. The compliance of the service user was really positive, with kind of very low rejection rates. I think that's kind of testament to the communications, to the engagement, and I think the practice of the crews as well, that took the time to speak to members of the public at the same time. So that was all kind of really strong. And yeah, we kind of felt that it went really well, and the kind of objectives of the trial were met well. On the back end of that, we looked at whether there's any kind of impact on the fleet in terms of the operation, and at that scale, across the scale of 3,600 properties, there was no material impact on the fleet, which was good. And the material was then bulked up at Evercreek transfer station, sent to Hartlepool, so retained material in the UK for reprocessing into polyethylene, polyurethane. In terms of the next steps, I think that where we kind of fell in terms of our over levels of resident participation across the trial areas was really good and high. We're kind of talking to Resource Futures and DEF at the moment to extend the trial to 20,000 properties. The extension requires a modification to a transfer station. Across 3,600 properties, picking these bags out of the material stream is a fairly straightforward job. Across 20,000 properties, it's a much more kind of labour intensive job, and there'd be a slight modification to the transfer station to extract that material from the plastic stream, as it needs to be sent off and dealt with separately. So this extension, we're looking to it's due to commence spring summer next year, or spring summer this year, but we're still working through our kind of final proposals and ensuring we've got kind of the full funding in place for this to happen at that point. There is a quite large question mark insofar that the trial is supposed to end on March 25th, and the funding hasn't been secured yet for the financial year 25-26. So we're kind of worried about that, and we're desperately trying to secure that at the moment. And that concludes my missive on the flexible plastics trial. If anyone's got any questions, I'll be quite happy to take them.
Thank you, Mike. As an apology, Dixie, having waited, you were going to introduce this item. Can I bring you in first? As I left the room so rudely before it began.
It's absolutely fine. Michael's done a great job, and I think the report is very clear, and I'm interested to hear what the scrutiny members have to say. That's all.
Benty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have succeeded in making me completely confused. As part of the living in what used to be Mendip District Council, we have got a black box, we've got a green box, we've got a brown box for food, we've got a nylon, a very smart, almost, I don't know what you want to call it. It is not supposed to be dirty. In there goes all our plastic. The black one, I think our glass goes in, and in the other one, all our paper and cardboard goes in, and the food goes in biodegradable bag in the brown one. Are you now telling me that we in the old Mendip area, we have got to change completely to something else? And I don't understand why you have got plastic bottles that are not allowed to go in your blue plastic bag, and we don't really want any plastic bags flying around in the landscape. It's messy enough as it is. If you could please explain, is it all right, Mr. Chairman, that I get an explanation?
I know there'll be a good answer to this because I'm on the trial, right?
So within the blue bag that you have at the moment, that is for the collection of effective plastic pots, tubs, and trays. What this trial looks to implement are things that were specifically excluded from that scheme. Things like food packaging, food packaging. That doesn't make any sense. Food wrapping, crisp packets, that kind of stuff. That's not there already. And it is just that kind of very flexible stuff that's excluded from the blue bag. So there is with this trial, what we've done, we provided effectively what is it's like a transparent blue plastic bag to present this material in. Okay, so it's an enhancement to what we're offering already to include this flexible plastic fraction. Okay, so in terms of our advice to residents is that this is a risk. Okay, what we instruct people to do is to firstly to tie the plastic bag so that if it does fall over, this light plastic fraction is not strewn all over the place. We've had a really good exercise in terms of the crew engagement where this has not been where this has not happened. What they've done, they've tied the bags and left a tag on the first time, and on the second time they've just tied the bag, left a tag, and said we're not taking it. Okay, so we kind of tried to reinforce it. That's worked reasonably well. In terms of the bag itself, because it is quite a light bag, I think each bag weighs, I think it's really not very much, but I mean they're kind of very light, like a bag for the crisp packets. What we kind of instruct people to do is kind of weigh them in between their recycling box, or effectively weigh it down with their food waste caddy.
Any other comments, Dave?
Thank you for the report. It all sounds very good. So two questions. One, firstly, just prompted by a discussion just had. So looking at the photo in there, I thought that the blue bag was going in the same compartment on the vehicle as the plastic containers and the cans. Is that where the flexible plastic bag is going as well? And just I hadn't thought about it before, but it's just if that is where it's going, would it not make sense to definitely want the flexible plastic contained together, because it's got to end up being separated? But would it be any sense that going in the blue bag with the other plastics, which then makes it less at risk of blowing about? Do you want to take that one? And then I've got another one if it's okay.
Sure. The risk we have with that, David, is, or Councillor Mansell, sorry, is that if we simply provide a container, it'll say basically put it into your blue plastic bag. What that means is kind of at the reprocessing stage, we can't adequately separate from that plastic and cans fraction. We could ask people to tie it up and to put it in a plastic bag, the blue bag, but that's quite a complex message. So at the moment, what we've said is to put it aside to put it as an addition to the recycle fleet, not in the bag, because we are concerned that it'll just be put in there loose, or just that film fraction is put in the blue bag, because people can't differentiate between those two things.
Can I just push you just a little bit of that? This is, I know it's a bit detailed, but I'm just wondering now what's happening on the collection vehicle, because I know there's a separate compartment. So you're aiming to keep the flexible plastic entirely separate on the collection vehicle. Is that what happens? Well, where does it go?
So on the collection vehicle, it does go into the plastic cans, into the plastic cans thing. What happens at the transfer station is that the bags are picked up. The bags are picked out of that fraction on a picking line and sent off separately.
Okay. All right. I must admit, I've still not quite got away from the bag. Let's have a little chat afterwards. That's okay. Let's not do it more now. And my other question was just if you could what you could tell us about the end uses, the markets for this material. Do you know much about that? Because that's obviously important, and that's one reason why it's not been collected up till now, because there's not really been a lot of reprocessors and users wanting to take this material back. Now clearly it's developing this, so that's good. So yeah, so I'd be pleased to hear what you can say, you know, on that, and what actual uses it's going back into. And just an aspect, I'd say the one bit of plastic that I was surprised was included was the foil lined packaging, because often when you mix materials together it's difficult to separate them out again. So the question seems to be, you know, where is that going to? Why, you know, what's the end route for that? Thanks.
Thanks, David. I need to come back with you. I think we'll need to come back to you in terms of a bit more detailed reply, but that material is staying within the UK. It's going up to it's going to Hartlepool to Sterling Polymers. That material is effectively being kind of granulated and then kind of thermally reprocessed into polypropylene or polyethylene. But in terms of the actual detail of that, David, I think in terms of that kind of supply chain, that's something I'll need to kind of take away and come back with you, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. And I've got Alan Bradford, please.
Mr. Chairman, I just got one question. Is most of that recycled in this country, or is it exported?
So I mean, in terms of the material from the trial, we're talking about really low quantities of this material at the moment. So from this trial, 3,600 properties across the past year, we've got about 7.5 tons. So it's really small kind of quantities. All of that material is staying within the UK and it's being reprocessed in Hartlepool at the moment. I think as a side, you know, the overwhelming majority of Somerset Council's waste does remain within the UK. It's about 96% at the moment stays in the UK. So that is the ambition for this material. It is, and that's part of the purpose of the trial. It's to stimulate that UK reprocessing capacity for this material.
Thank you for that. And can I just say, and there's a recycling place at Walford Cross, just outside of Taunton. And if anybody hasn't been there, it's very interesting. You're probably talking about a different thing, a softer thing, sound like it. If anybody visited the place and see how some of these things are handled in a big way, it's very interesting. It really is.
Thank you. But if there's no other question, just to say that I'm on this trial. It's very assertive and clever of you to have chosen Frome to begin this trial, knowing that we're all very conscientious Green councillors in Frome, and I mean, an observation, the bags are marked so you know what you're actually putting in there. So it's crisp wrappers, sweet wrappers, that sort of thing, that kind of film that you get on the top of if you've got tubs of you know, meat products and things like that. So it's quite clear what you have to do. But it does rely, like all of these things, it relies on conscientious approaches by the householders, because you know, it takes you a bit longer to do it, because you're separating your own, not just chucking stuff in the bin. But you know, providing you can get that mentality to people, I don't see why it shouldn't be a success. And to answer Dave's question, yes, I sort of surreptitiously observe the bin men coming around, sorry, the waste collectors are coming around, and I see them, you know, they're separating it. And as for the bag, whether the bag blows down the road or not, because it's a lightweight bag, like a supermarket shopping bag, But I mean, you tend to put it in with the bottles if you've got a fairly empty box. There, you know, you just make sure it doesn't blow down the road. I haven't seen any sort of multitude of blue bags recently blowing down the road. So I think it's been a good scheme personally, and thank you very much for reporting on it.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah. And with that, that's the last agenda item. Got a couple of things to say. Dave Mansell has slipped a note this way saying we still need to cover the forward plan. I think the point you're making, Dave, is that we haven't actually put forward suggestions ourselves for the forward plan. Yeah, I don't. Okay, well, look, I think we can't discuss that now. We can't add that to the agenda at this stage because it could go on forever.
May I just quickly say we should really have the forward plan agenda, and it was, but we jumped it on the agendas. And it was partly because it wasn't included in our papers that we done. If we don't have the opportunity to say it, can we have the portfolio holders, please, to give us a report at the meetings? That's what I was going to ask, and what the opportunity I was waiting to for this item to be taken. So, and I'll do it quickly. Could we have Dixie at the next one? I've no idea what's on the agenda because we've not got it in front of us now. Could we have Dixie at the next one? Could we have Richard at the one after that, please? I think that would be good. And I've slightly got that in mind because we don't know much longer this scrutiny committee is going to continue. But can I please request that?
So, I mean, I'm not clear what you want Dixie to be there for.
Well, on scrutiny committees that I've attended before, we've quite often had the portfolio along to give a report on their portfolio, and then it's an opportunity to ask them questions about it. I think Dixie will be familiar with this because she's done it before.
Yeah, sure. Dixie, would you like to reply?
I think what might work is if we take the report that went to the last full council meeting, because there is a cycle of portfolio reports on there, and inevitably at a full council meeting when we're dealing with a shed load of other stuff, there's kind of not a great deal of time to tease into that. So I would certainly be happy for scrutiny members to look more closely at that report, and if they've got kind of questions or comments to discuss, then I'm happy to kind of be there to kind of field those questions. Probably might want a bit of a time limit because there would be an opportunity to go down a rabbit hole of people's pet subjects. Not that I'm suggesting you have any pet subjects, Councillor Mansell, but you know what I mean. Thank you.
I think there are a few pet subjects in the room. No, I think that if we had some very important point, if we do have issues we want incorporating in the forward plan or thinking about, I think it would be perfectly acceptable to email them in to Dixie, copy myself in, the officers in, and the rest of the committee. Then we can sort of shortlist it. What I would like to point out to you is that we have pre-meetings on this. The agenda for these meetings could be absolutely enormous. And the fact that we only have these meetings every 2 months makes it really difficult to fit things in. And I will hold my hand up and say that, as all chairs of scrutiny are asked to sign things off, there are things I would like to have brought to this committee that I've had to make a decision on because there simply isn't the time to do that. And I don't feel good about that, but it happens. I was questioned on something in the last full council meeting. Erroneously, actually, as it happened, the facts weren't right. But then I was put on the spot about signing off something, which I had very little choice but to make the decision. I couldn't wait until this meeting before it was signed off. So, yeah, if we can get things brought to the committee, great. But I would warn you, that it's very difficult. I do have a lot of sympathy with the officers who have got to try and get through work plans, forward plans, and actually be dealing with the crisis that we're in at the moment. So please bear that in mind. But I think if we could do some of these things by email, that would help. The other thing that I want to just remind us of, well, Dave, I'm going to give you a chance to come back, but I really don't want to make it a debate.
Okay, well, I'm a committee member. I've been on lots of scrutiny committees. I have to say, and we're in the same group. I'm not too happy with that response. I believe the committee as a whole should be able to look at these. And this is the point we've kept been banging on about and trying to say. We need a forward plan here, and the committee needs to have a little bit of say. I want to, maybe the other committees members aren't bothered, but this committee member would like a little bit of contribution to what this committee covers. And I'm sorry, but I'm not taking too kindly to being told, no, you've got to go
I
away.
didn't
or
say,
email
excuse
it.
me, I didn't.
I would just like it as an item on the agenda so we can talk about it, please. That is all I'm requesting. And that's a really common thing to happen at scrutiny committees. And why it's a difficulty here is beyond me, if I'm honest.
I'm assuming that the item will come up on the next agenda meeting. I've assumed that in what I've said. I'm just asking that in the meantime, if you've got specific issues that you like to be, please email them in. I wasn't saying it wasn't going to be on the next meeting. But I didn't want this to be a debate, but you know, I've outlined to you that some of the difficulties that we have in trying to refine what we're going to talk about. But anyway, sorry, Dixie.
I'm just thinking about this, and I'm thinking about the breadth of the portfolio report, and I think what might work better, and this is only a suggestion, you're the scrutiny committee, would be if committee members wanted to sort of zoom in on a couple of issues within that report rather than the global report. I think that a deep dive might be more useful than the overview, but also I am always happy to kind of answer questions by email, you know, on a kind of one-to-one level as well. So that's just a suggestion, but it's up to the committee.
No other comments?
Would you like me to add something from an officer perspective?
Yes.
Chair. Yeah, so I think we need to be mindful of capacity as well to support our executive lead members in having these kind of discussions. So I think 2 points I'd want to make. One is the forward plan, I think was a suggestion from officers about the sorts of things that were coming up and that the committee might want to consider. I don't think we were saying that was the plan in a fixed sense. So there's obviously room there to discuss those issues that we're suggesting that the forward plan might cover, and to agree that as a committee. In terms of the lead members coming along, I would certainly want to make sure that I think the issues that were discussed were raised in advance so that we've got an opportunity to support the lead members in having those discussions and to make sure relevant officers are available, just because as Dixie says, these are wide-ranging portfolios, and I think to have a very fruitful conversation, we'd want to be able to support that. So just a couple of points from me. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I think the other thing I'd like to add into that is also we'll be obviously hearing about, in the meantime, about the special meeting that we are going to call in hopefully in February, and that will go in the minutes, and we'll be in touch about that. Henry?
Mr. Chairman, at the moment, and I understand where David's coming from, every bit of our agenda is filled with stuff that's got to go to the executive or is important to get through on the timetable. There are absolutely no slots anywhere for discussing something that is not immediately needed to be discussed. And I brought this up before. I really feel that we need to be looking at a monthly meeting. And I've said that before in this thing, and I've actually written emails about it to Jamie, who's had correspondence with me on the subject.
I agree with you entirely on that. I don't think we're in a position where it's ideal having 2 monthly meetings. Similarly, we are now a climate and place committee, not simply an environment committee, as I chaired previously. So the agenda, the possibilities of the agenda are very big. But we are in a position where we can't really, I certainly can't influence how many times we meet. And it's something we just simply have to get along with. In an ideal world, perhaps we would meet. I would put it on record that I'm not happy with the proposal that this committee or committees are reduced from 13 to 9. I don't think that's necessarily democratic and correct, but the way things are going, it's not necessarily in our hands. And therefore, I ask you to be sort of sympathetic to the situation we're in at the moment, and not everything is possible that we would like. And unless there are any other points with that, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Thank you for the people that are online and for listening in. And the next scheduled meeting will be here. It'd be nice if it was warmer, but at least our carbon footprint isn't that high. On the 20th of March at 10 o'clock. Thank you.